So I want to share with you some of the leadership lessons, the ahas for me, and then answer some of the questions that you might have. The first one I want to talk about is there's a guy named Pete Dawkins. Pete Dawkins, if you open the word leadership in the dictionary, you probably see this guy's picture. He suffered from smallpox when he was a kid. He overcame it. He got into athletics. He got recruited to Yale, Harvard, but he decided to go to West Point. And when he was at West Point, he was on the wrestling team, baseball team, and football team. He ends up becoming the captain of the football team his senior year. He also maintained a 4.0 academic record. He gets chosen as a Rhodes Scholar. And then if that's not to top it off, he gets chosen that year as the Heisman Trophy winner. And he becomes the youngest general in the history of the U.S. Army. He decides to get out of the Army when they offered him a second star. And he ended up going into the corporate world, and when I interviewed him, he was working as the vice chairman of Citigroup. So I come up to him and I'm telling him I'm doing this leadership book, and he kind of laughs. And he said, Garcia, if you go into Amazon and you put in diet books, there's like 100,000 of them. And if you put leadership, that's like number 2. And you're looking for like secrets, and there are no secrets. It's like, think of a diet book. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of diet books, but if someone asks me, how do you lose weight? You do 2 things. You eat less, and you exercise. Right. That's it. But there's the South Beach diet and the Subway diet and everything else. And said leadership is the same thing. I said, well, what do you mean? He said leadership is about having a laser-like focus on your people. And he started telling me stories. He said, look, in my office, and he said, you see this office out here? Even though I have over 10,000 people that I'm responsible for, there's 17 people out there. I know all of their names. I know their spouses' names. I know their children's names. In some cases, I know their pets' names. And I make a point to have 2 meaningful contacts with them every day. That means at least 1 minute of conversation with them. I'm not their friend, I'm their boss, but I know what they want in life. I know what their goals and aspirations are. And it was funny because we were walking out when he was seeing me out, and one of the guys came up to him, he was going to say something, and he saw me, and he said, don't worry, Pete, I'll catch you on the drive-by. That's kind of what they called it, because everyone in that office knew that at least twice in a day he was going to stop by and have a conversation with them. And you think about your own lives or leaders that you know, how many people that are above you know your name or know your children's names or your spouse's names. And Pete just gave me example after example of the first thing a leader does is he's connected with the people. And the people know that he or she cares because he is connected to them. And I think that is a key thing. Another example, one of my classmates, Mitchell Reese, worked for General Colin Powell when he was at the NSC, the National Security Council. On his second week of work, and the NSC, when you're a White House fellow there, you're working from 7 in the morning till midnight, often 7 days a week. It's a real pressure, intense job. 2 weeks into his fellowship, there's a NSC picnic. So he shows up with his wife, Elizabeth, and Colin Powell has an apron on, he's flipping hamburgers, and the minute he sees Mitch and Elizabeth, he goes over and he shakes Elizabeth's hand. Oh, you must be Elizabeth. How are you? I just want to thank you for loaning Mitch to the National Security Council. He's doing a great job, and I know he's going to work really hard, and I really appreciate you letting him come work so hard for us. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate to call me. And have a great time. And he walked away, and Elizabeth looked up to Mitch and said, Mitch, you better do a good job for that man. And there's a lot, the NSC is pretty big. And Colin Powell took the time to memorize the names of all the wives and spouses. Some people showed up with kids. He knew the kids' names in advance. That's what leaders, great leaders, do. And it's one of those kind of so obvious things of lose weight and exercise, but how many of us in here don't bother to have that type of connection with the people that we lead, even sometimes even our peers. Another interesting White House fellow was a young woman. She was 24 when she was selected, and her name is Doris Kearns Goodwin. Doris Kearns Goodwin is a presidential scholar. Because of her White House fellowship experience working directly with Lyndon Johnson, she started writing writing books about presidents, and she won the Pulitzer Prize for that. But on one early February wintry morning, she was teaching government at Harvard. The phone rings at 6 a.m. and she knew exactly who the heck would be calling her at 6 a.m. It was Lyndon Johnson. He hadn't slept that night. He had said, you need to get married. You need to focus on your family. And he was really lonely. He said, the only one that's around me is Lady Bird. My kids aren't here. I was a workaholic. All I did was work, work, work. I had no balance in my life. Don't let what happened to me happen to you. And she started, joking around with him. And she said, he said, I'm talking to you. This is really serious. You need to have balance in your life. You need to get married. You need to have children. You need to spend time with them. Okay, yes, Mr. President, I'll do that. And 2 days later, he died. And it's the last memory that she has of him. And the Carter administration, when President Carter was elected, the administration called Doris to be the head of the Peace Corps, something she always wanted to do. But she'd be traveling all the time. She had 2 young children. And she made a decision, and she thought back to the balance that Lyndon Johnson was talking about. She said, you know what? Not only am I not going to accept that job, but I'm going to continue writing more on a full-time basis and not teaching so much and spend more time with my kids. And that's what she did. And just some great stories also about what certain presidents have done who are in this, in the White House, and how they've achieved kind of a work-life balance even being president. Another one, former head of CNN, Tom Johnson, who was also the head of the LA Times, talks about being a workaholic. He suffered from depression. He talked about his depression for the first time, about hiding under a desk of the LA Times when he was suffering through bouts of depression. He didn't want anyone to find out, and what a terrible father he was because he wasn't spending time with his family. And now how, with proper medication and just the realization that his kids really missed out. And it's something that many of us here that are leaders, that are professionals, that are in the business world, that are working for the Procter & Gamble's of the world and think that our lives are indispensable at work, really need to think through. Leaders have a balanced life between the people you love, the things that make you come alive as a man or a woman, and hopefully also your spiritual life. And by balancing those 3 things, you're going to be very, you're going to have a lot more success.